Good morning, everyone from the UK, England, from me and Dan. We're both in the same place.
Oh.
Good morning, Dan.
Good morning, Agnes. Good morning, everybody. We all right?
All good here. You have actually said there's snow at your place.
Yes, we're hogging the snow up here in the northwest, in the Peak District at the moment. So some very silvery trees out there. It's very atmospheric. So
lovely.
It's
Lovely.
just stopped now. But I expect we'll have more later on the hills, probably.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, you have got some interesting bits and pieces for us today. We're actually going to look at a totally new author today and go through some little bits and pieces. And which book is it from today?
Today we're looking at somebody called Prentice Mulford.
Yes.
And I'll just hold my iPad up. Can you see that?
Can you bring it in a bit closer?
Yeah, sure. Got a bit of glare there.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, I'll put the link down below for that book for people if they want to check it out later.
Yeah, so it was a bit of it was something I found really on when you sort of stumble across on Amazon books that you might be interested in. So obviously I was looking at Neville quite a bit originally, and then I got steered into the realms of other New Thought authors, and Prentice came up on the screen with this massive tome of about 6 volumes. So I've just finished the first volume, and there's about 8 chapters in there.
Beautiful.
And I'm like 10% through the book at the moment. So I imagine if it was in real life, it would be about this great big thing that you could use as a doorstop when you weren't actually reading it. But he's got some very interesting sort of quotes and concepts in there. It sort of goes a little bit into what similar things that Neville talks about, in the sense that, you know, what you think about attracts and everything like that, and what you put out comes back to you in a nutshell. Those kind of concepts. But then he goes into a lot more sort of depth about how we can concentrate our thoughts, and the nature of thought and concentration, and how important that is. So a bit more about like the mechanics of that, rather than just saying you need to do this. This is what you need to do, and sort of this is how your mind works. There's lots of stuff in there about the mind, and learning to master how you control your mind.
Great.
For your benefit, basically, but also explaining if you don't control your mind, it controls you, etc. So I've just pulled out a few quotes from the book, which I thought we could have a little discussion about. So the first chapter, he's talking about where you go when you sleep. So he says, every thought, though unspoken, is something which goes to that person, thing, or locality on which it is placed. Your spirit then has, during the day, been sent in 1,000, perhaps 10,000 different directions. When you think, you work. Every thought presents an outlay of force. So he then goes on to talk about learning to center your spirit and your thoughts on one thing. Because I think what he's saying in this chapter is that you can, throughout the day, if you don't sort of control your thoughts and your mind, you end up thinking about 1,000 things at once. And this is actually using your energy, your bodily, your spiritual energy. You're using it on things that aren't necessarily beneficial to you. And it's about training your mind to think about or concentrate on one thing. So when you're sort of awake, when you can feel your thoughts scattering around, try to focus on and be present on one thing at a time. So you're not using that energy for things that aren't beneficial to you.
For sure. And we only get so much energy per day.
Yes.
And if you sleep 6 to 8 hours, you've got, 16, 18 hours of the day that you can practice the mindfulness. And then your life just gets easier, because you're not plugging your socket into unsavory topics that then bring photocopies in the 3D of the evidence of what you've been thinking.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's lovely.
Yeah, I think as well, he talks a lot about learning to take moments out of the day where you just sit and meditate, I guess, and try not to think about anything whatsoever. Because in what he talks about in the book is that your mind at night, when it goes to sleep, he talks a lot about spiritual tiredness rather than, emotional tiredness rather than physical tiredness. And what he says in the book is that it's at night when you go to sleep, it's your spirit that's tired from all these thoughts, and where you've been sending your spirit in the day and your thoughts in the day is actually tiring out your spirit, and it's so scattered, it hasn't got that force to then, do what it needs to do in order to get you to get to where you want to get in life and the wishes that you want. So he talks about sitting and, for moments throughout your day, closing your eyes and training your mind to not think about anything for, say, a minute or two. So literally just blank your mind. And what he says in that time is your thoughts will then, your spirit will then sort of gather its energy back to the center. So through all these scattered thoughts and all these sort of dissipated energies, if you like, will then draw back to the center, to your center. It's about being centered and drawing that energy back to yourself when you need to, in order to be able to be most effective in the endeavors that you do throughout the day.
Makes total sense, because I think we like that quote from Neville about energy, where he says about where everything needs to be an investment. Your energy, your time, your money all needs to be an investment. And I hear a lot of people saying, I'm exhausted. And it's like, well, that tells you you're not managing your energy properly, which ties in with what he's saying. If you do stuff that draws you back in and recharges the battery, you got to look at how well am I doing with that? And you and I were just talking about before we started recording, you've got this fabulous fire pit. You actually sit outside, watch the fire burning. It's a calm, beautiful, I think, recharging the spirit activity. And I know I've done a lot of that too, having grown up partly in Canada. I love fire. It's calming. It's if obviously if it's contained, and it is such a beautiful thing to look at, and it brings you and pulls you back into yourself. So it's finding more ways to do that. And I think nature and burning fire is a great way to do it.
I think certainly fire is one of my ones that I like to just sit and watch the flames. I find it very mesmerizing. And I know Neville talks a bit about in one of his books about if you have trouble getting into a state, to actually stare at a candle flame and just stare for as long as you can, and it will actually allow you to access the subconscious or the underlying thoughts and that part of your mind that drives the the attraction kind of thing. I think all elements to some degree are very, very mesmerizing, like water as well. I find very calming if I can hear a stream, or even the wind, in the trees, that kind of thing. It's that kind of constant noise, I guess, or that constant flame, or the constant trickle of it's very grounding. I think it draws you back to nature, really, and back to the roots, because we're all connected to nature, aren't we, in one way or another. So I think when we come back to those basic elements of nature, we almost come back to ourselves in a way, and our primitive connection, really.
I agree. And I think even just being in nature, it's like the energy just comes to you, because nature is so calming. Well, obviously not if you're having full-on weather, but you're going to go out in the weather to have a walk or to explore or hiking or whatever. The energy of the earth, the trees, the grass, the rivers, the rocks, it does recharge us humans. It gives us a lot for free
It
that
does.
we probably, a lot of us, take for granted. But yeah, giving thanks for that is, I think I cannot not have nature in my life. It doesn't matter, even if I live in the city. You know, there's huge parks everywhere, massive old trees that have been there for years. You can find lots of amazing pockets of nature wherever you go. And it is
Yeah,
such a, it is a blessing beyond words.
I think trees are very symbolic of what we try to do as well, in the sense that they've got these very strong roots.
Yeah.
They're very firm foundations.
Mm.
And like the wind doesn't shake them. It doesn't.
Mm.
They sway with the wind. You know,
Yeah.
they go with that kind of what happens to them. They sway with it. They don't try and resist it as such.
Yeah.
I think there's quite a lot of lessons, you know, to be learned from nature, like with water as well.
Yeah.
The Tao Te Ching, the Tao,
Yeah.
talks a lot about being like water and being non-resistant and
Mm.
sort of flowing with, flowing with life and not resisting life, but flowing with it. And that's actually not, non-resistance is the strongest form of, the strongest
Yeah.
force really, because you're not resisting, you're flowing with what comes to you and adapting to it, kind of thing.
Yeah. For
Yeah.
sure. For sure.
I was watching something the other day on ice bathing, Nordic ice bathing, where they jump in a ice cold lake and it recharges them. And that's quite a fascinating concept as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That would really get you, wow, everything moving out of pure shock, wouldn't it?
It certainly would, definitely.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's a bit like a reboot for the body. Definitely. So just going on to the next quote from Prentice. He says, what you image in your mind is a spiritual reality. That is what your image, you are actually in spirit, and by spirit doing. So what you're imagining, you're actually doing in a spiritual realm, as it were.
Mm.
He talks a lot about the spiritual body sort of going to these other places and seeing and encountering other forces and people that you haven't yet encountered in life, almost going forwards and doing all this kind of preemptive work, if you like, and sort of working on other minds while you're asleep as well, which I know we talked a little bit about with some of Neville's recent stuff as well,
Yeah.
where you're almost like what you think about just before you fall off to sleep then goes out to, or your
Mm.
spirit carries on doing the work that you were thinking of last when you went to sleep, kind of thing.
Yeah. That's so true. I think that one thing has been something that's helped me to create, well, pretty much everything that I am living today. It was that, taking things into sleep and imagining, well, it's living in the end. It's living in the end, living in the end of what you want. And then you get that relief and then you go into sleep with it. And then you might have a dream about it or you might not dream at all. But
Yeah.
it's letting go in. It's like you're dropping into the manifestation. It's not you're here in the manifestations over there, you're trying to draw it to you.
Yeah.
When you do that, you're actually picking yourself up by the back of the neck and you're dropping yourself into the manifestation. And I think that feels easier. Like if you imagine like you're jumping out of a plane and with parachute.
Yeah.
It's like that is easier than I'm here and it's hard and I got to try and draw and attract this thing. That always felt harder to me. Whereas dropping myself from the parachute into the imaginal scene, that always was fun. And it's like the energy of that, you kind of got like the wind's blowing you into
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, it's finding ways to make things fun. And the more fun it is, then the energy's right that you're using to plant and fertilize and marinate
Yeah.
the desire.
That's it. And I think sometimes it's getting into sleep it's almost like I struggle sometimes to actually go into sleep thinking about the the thing. And I think it all ties in with learning to control the thoughts. I think the better you get at that, the more you can, it's easier then to go into sleep with that controlled thoughts, that controlled reverie, if you like.
Yes.
Then takes you off to that place. So I think that's the kind of skill that you have to sort of master, and you have to exercise your mind in order to do that. I think it gets easier, like you say, as you do it more. It's just repetition, isn't it? I think with these things.
That's all it is. And remembering to do it, because I think we just have night habits when we're tired. You know, you just, what, did you check your phone? Are you talking to the person that's laying in bed next to you if you're sleeping alone? Are you watching something on Netflix and then you just shut it down because you've fallen asleep while you're watching it? Like, what is it that you do for the hour leading up to you closing your eyes? What are you doing for that hour?
That's key, isn't it?
That's a golden hour, I think.
Yes,
and it's
it is
often wasted.
A bit like a sunset.
Yeah, a bit like a sunset. It is a golden hour. I do a lot of my really good work in that last hour. You know, I've been doing, since we've been talking about fires, I've been listening to Crackling Fire YouTubes, and it's just, sometimes they go on for 8 hours. I mean, I don't listen that long. I usually put an hour, and then I do my imaginal scenes over the top because it's a really comforting winter sound.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can almost imagine yourself in a log cabin in the woods somewhere with
yeah
fire going.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Nice, definitely. What Prentice then goes on to say in this chapter is the elements that we put out go to others, and they act accordingly. I don't know if you've ever noticed this sometimes, but I think people can sometimes, I think what Prentice is saying here is people can sometimes act in a random way, and you think, where did that come from? You know, you'll be talking to them and suddenly they'll flip, and you'll be like, I'm not sure where that came from. But I think what we're seeing here is sometimes is what we think of others, they reflect sometimes what they reflect back to us. So I think Prentice talks a lot about in this chapter about being mindful about your thoughts towards other people, and what you're projecting, because what you're thinking of them is actually going to that person, and it's like a force. So if you're thinking ill will of that person, then that force is going to them, and their mind is reacting to that what you put out there. So it's almost being very mindful of that, of thoughts, and thinking only of good things. I think it was in the Bible where it's think of only lovely things or something. There's a quote, isn't there? I'm not quite entirely sure what the quote is, but it's that kind of thinking of, because it's preservation of yourself in a way as well, because their coming back to you will affect you.
It does.
Like a reaction, isn't it?
It really is. And it's like you can either elevate yourself or demote yourself in that moment by whatever direction you choose to have a thought about that person, whoever it is. So it does go out towards them, but it's the long-term impact it has on you. If you do that with repetition, you're actually holding them you're condemning them to that state. And we do condemn people to certain states, but if you can rise up in your thought and hold them in a really good light, I think it can transform you.
Yes.
Because you're reaching for something better than what you reached for before. So if you've got someone in your life that you've been doing that to, remember it's a boomerang.
Yes.
It will come back and hit you at the least suspecting moment. So, it's a bit like forgiveness. People say, I can't forgive that person for what they did, but the forgiveness isn't for them. it's for you to release yourself from carrying the burden after the event. Yeah.
I think it's a bit like holding on to a thorny rose, isn't it? It injures yourself. Whereas if you let rose, you can, your hand can heal, kind of thing. It's that kind of image.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So true.
Is actually injuring you as well as. He does talk a little bit in the next chapter, The Art of Forgetting. He talks about grief weakening the mind and the body. And he talks about, a persistent thought of determination on a purpose, especially if such a purpose be of benefit to others as well as ourselves, will fill every nerve with strength. It is a wise selfishness, he calls it, that benefits others along with ourselves. So I think obviously the flip side of that is if you're coming, from a thoughts of sickness and illness and anger, that then affects the body. So the mind and the body, it's that link between the mind and the body, I think. So you actually, by having those bad thoughts, you're actually affecting your physical health as well. And one of his quotes a bit further on is something like, you never see like a healthy miser or something. And it's so true. He's got some very good phrases. He's a bit like Stuart in that way, Stuart Wilde.
Yeah.
Some very good
good little one-liners.
Yeah. But we don't really think about it, do I don't think as people generally, we don't think about those thoughts that we're putting out, and we don't think about the effect it's having on us, because it almost sometimes to have a good grumble about somebody feels a bit therapeutic, but long term it's actually not helping you.
It's not. And it probably sticks you like glue to that situation and that person for longer.
Yes.
Whereas if you can actually unhook yourself from them being like a piece of gum on the bottom of your shoe, because the energy of negativity, the energy of the grumbling, the energy of complaining, the energy of about them is what draws them to you and brings them with more potency towards us. So it's a tough one, because we do get some enjoyment out of complaining about somebody.
Yes, and it's known. Yeah, it's a very it's destructive, isn't it? But we don't really, and it almost reinforces that link you have with that person. I think from what you were just saying before. I think that bond between you and that person, or that link on the spiritual level, is strengthened, and whereas it's almost like by forgiving them, or saying I'm not making a conscious decision not to partake in that kind of action, it almost severs that cord of negativity.
It does.
I mean, a lot of cases it can actually benefit you both, in the sense that you can then become really good friends, or you can almost move past that, and
you can move past it. Yeah, for sure.
And just in on cue, Prentice says, to be able then to throw off or forget a thought or force which is injuring us is a most important means for gaining strength of body and clearness of mind. Strength of body and clearness of mind brings success in all undertakings. He goes on to talk about sort of businesses and working with business and working with people, and he says, when you have an idea, or you think of an idea or something that you want to do in your life, if you work along the lines of encouragement and positivity and positive determination, the universe, or the thoughts that you put out, will actually attract the right people at the right time, and it will actually attract those situations and those connections through the unseen forces, that we talk about with Neville and stuff. And it almost, as well as the situations, it'll attract the right kind of people to us,
your business. Yeah, it's so true. I think I've been looking at lately setting the intention that the people that I work with really want to do the self-love work as the priority, and you know, if they want a relationship or a specific person or all of that, that's totally fine, but that they really want to do the self-love work. And it's changing the type of people that are coming to work with me, because they want to really do that for themselves. It's not just, let me get this self-love out of the way so that I can get that. It's a different approach. And it's really changed the people that have been coming to me now, probably for the last few months, since I cut out all that social media, cut out all the crap out of my life that was not enjoyable or not benefiting my well-being. It's changed the shape of the type of people that I work with, which is really fascinating, because you know, it's a different type of person that just wants to do the self-love to get the relationship, and the people that want to do the self-love because they're really tired of suffering and chasing and looking at someone making them feel loved and wanted. It's really changed, and it's so beautiful to see people get that, the importance of this for themselves, because they're tired of suffering and they don't want to try and suck love out of somebody anymore. So it's a wonderful thing to actually change, not through action, you know, like, you know, people place ads or do whatever they do. I mean, I've never gone that route, but I think when you work on the internal, the business is just an extension of you. Your relationship's an extension of you. Your money's an extension of you. Everything is an extension of you. And I think, you know, we do this stuff around diet, changing what we eat. And you and I, you know, talk about that quite a bit, because we love going to organic markets and stuff on weekends. But it's like, if you're doing the food, but then you've got a polluted mind, you've missed half of the whole thing. They're two halves of a nut that you have to try and work on for the well-being, the whole well-being being in balance.
Yes, so I think the body, and there's lots of aspects to it, isn't there? I think, like you say, it's a whole. It's almost like a fully holistic approach, I think.
Yep.
So if one part of the element or one part of the chain is broken or is weak, then it weakens the whole thing, really. So you can you know, eat really well, but if you're going to bed at night feeling angry and grieving over something, then that's almost gonna pull your body down anyway.
It does.
And then if you're feeling grieving, you're not going to eat very well. So it's like a vicious circle, in the sense that, you know, you're not feeling very well. You want some kind of quick fix. So you go and buy a pizza, and to give yourself a bit of a comfort, a bit of a pampering or whatever. And you think, oh, this will make me feel better. It's like a short-term satisfaction, and then you feel worse after you've had 2 hours after you've had the pizza, because you've not only have you felt, you know, rubbish before, you've actually now your body's feeling rubbish because you've eaten an extra large pizza. Not that I've ever done that, of course. But
it's only hearsay. I've never experienced it. Yeah, I know. Speaking of which, I've been making pizza with cauliflower base.
Yes, I've seen them. I've had one before.
It's brilliant. Tasty. Yeah. I'll see if I can find the recipe for the cauliflower base, and I'll put, for those people that don't want to eat wheat, and the pizza tasted really good.
I've had hummus on a pizza before. That's very nice as well.
Yum. God, don't get us started with food.
With food.
Dan and for the viewers, Dan and I regularly send photos of what we've cooked, what we bought at the markets. We're both, like, I will use the word addicted to organic food and good food and home cooked food. So really? That's a little passion and a fun bit of our life. Is just that, what can I go and, what's the word for when you go, is it foraging?
Foraging.
Foraging for good little nuggets or little seeds or little whatever. We won't go on to the mince tarts because that's over now. But
Yeah.
oh,
I've still
food.
got 3 Christmas puddings in the
Oh,
cupboard.
I'm jealous. I've run out. I've used up my stock.
Little mini ones. From what you were saying about what you're saying about foraging there. That's in a way that's a bit back to the elements of nature again, aren't we? We're taking in by eating those berries or those, that wild garlic and making some pesto with it. We're actually we're taking in that nature. We're taking in the pureness of nature and the energy of nature into our bodies, which then obviously sustains and nourishes us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, Dan, one of the things, if you can, just for the well-being from a food point of view, if you can say, okay, I'm going to eat, if it's not made by nature, I'm not going to eat it. I think that has transformed my body over the years. Now I still eat the odd. I'm a bit of a night scoffer. I love scoffing while I've had my meal and I'm up till midnight or 1, and I think, oh, what's in the cupboard? So I love night scoffing, but it's finding things like mashed banana and peanut butter and honey instead of grabbing a packet of chips, stuff like that. At least make an effort to get something that satisfies a craving, but that it's actually a bit healthier. So anyway,
I'd say my diet's probably about 80% healthy and organic, but I do like, as I say, I have a cupboard raid every now and again, and it's like biscuits. That kind of thing.
Me too, and chocolate and cakes from the cake, really nicely made cakes from a nice patisserie, stuff like that. I mean, Portuguese tarts, tiramisu. I mean, look, all that stuff is just
sometimes you do. It's that balance, isn't it? And that consciousness, that yes, I'm going to have this, but I'm not going to be ruled by it.
Not be ruled by it. Yeah.
But yes, I think what you were going back to what you were saying about the kind of things you attract, or the things that you attract and the people you attract changing. I think the temptation is often to, like you say, grab from the external and go to to try and do things to force things to happen, if you like. I'll just send another email to such and such, or I'll just go and ring this person just so they know I'm interested in their offer, kind of thing. Whereas it's about stepping back and coming back into ourselves and doing that inner work, isn't it? I think, and what when you sort out the core, it's what you then project out will then attract the things that you'll see in the 3D. And I think it's that.
Yeah. You know what I've noticed, Dan? Even Gmail, this cracks me up. I've got to actually work out how to disconnect this. But even Gmail, you've sent someone an email and it says where you can actually follow it up. It says dismiss, like you sent this 5 days ago. It gives you a reminder of the email you sent to that person and they haven't replied. And I just always hit dismiss. I'm not chasing that whole thing. Oh, I have to follow up. That comes from a desperate energy and neediness. You don't have to chase up or follow up stuff if your energy's right. That's where in business the neediness comes out, or if it's an email to a personal person. But you just go, even the platforms and the websites are like, oh, you were at the checkout, but you didn't purchase anything. Do you need any help? It's like, no, if I needed help, I would have called you. So it's like everything is geared to coax, poke, follow up, push, and control. Even the platforms we use, no wonder we're so used to it, because they're all there to try and get something more out of us.
That's very true. I think you sometimes go into a shop and you will just be looking around, won't you? And somebody will come up to you and say, "Can I help you with something?" And I'm like, "I'm just looking.
I'm just looking."
So it's ingrained in society, I think.
It is.
With media, with social media as well. I think there's that kind of feeds that needing energy, doesn't it? I think
it does.
It can really control you. I know, in the past, I've gone through periods where I've been a bit taken in by it all, and I've been on social media, and I have sort of succumbed to that at times in the past, not so
Yeah.
much now. But it almost brings out that side of people, I think, where you need to get some kind of approval in
Yeah.
order to fit into,
Yeah.
society. You need to have a Facebook account. You need to
I
be
know.
posting, everything you're doing,
I
so
know.
people can see what you're doing and see that you've got a great life and
I know.
kind of thing. And
Whereas people that have a great life, they're not I mean, some people do because they like to share, but I think a
yeah,
lot of people that are having a great life, they don't need reassurance and they're not doing that stuff. They're actually
that's
living
right.
it, enjoying it. They're not photographing it to show other people later. They're just
Yeah,
enjoying the book, or they're enjoying the
yeah,
trip, or they're enjoying, and you might send a couple of pictures to people via WhatsApp or something, but
yeah.
there is such a minimal need for attention from outside sources. It's wonderful to be free of that. It's
It
wonderful.
is. Yeah, I think it all kind of comes together as you evolve in a
Yep.
spiritual sense. I think because you've got that energy
Yeah.
inside that you're centering yourself,
Yes.
and you're getting your source of sustenance from the infinite and drawing
Yeah.
it into yourself. You almost don't need the external energy in order to feed yourself. So you've got this, you're sort of
Yeah.
piped into this or plugged into this infinite supply of energy,
That's so true. And
which
that's enough. It's enough.
it is definitely.
Mm.
Um, so, what just on my final point, what I was going to say was about obviously what I talked a bit about thought projection, but we also Prentice talks a little bit in his fifth chapter about thought absorption as well. So people are actually sending their thoughts to us sometimes, and we
Mm.
don't necessarily know where these thoughts are coming from. We'll just suddenly have a very strange, a nice thought, or a very, sometimes an unpleasant thought.
Mm.
So it's about being aware that other people may be sending you energy, and it's
Yeah.
how you deal with that energy and how you almost train your mind to resist that energy
Mm.
through your positivity and your positive
Mm.
mental state, because
Mm.
those things can't touch you. Those spears can't touch you if you're in a state of self-love and
Yeah.
self-sustenance.
That's so true. I love that thought absorption. I've never thought of it that way. Thought
Yeah,
projection, thought absorption. That's lovely wording. I think, yeah, because we talk a lot about it with, on YouTube and all of that about thought projection, which, I'm sure Neville wasn't the first person to talk about it, but we did learn a lot about that from him. And
yeah,
I think, we're so often using it to influence an outcome that we desire. But I think these days I use thought projection to, when someone has told me that they want something, that it's not about what I want for them or what I want from them. It's about what I can do to assist them to create their desire. So I spend my time now, when someone has told me something, whether it's in, working with somebody one-on-one, whether it's my mom, whether it's my niece or nephew or a friend of mine, I think, oh, they would really love to have, their own home, or they would really love to have. So I try and spend, a couple of minutes holding that desire for them, because I've got no negative emotion attached to it. It's easier to imagine for someone when you've got no negative thoughts intercepting you
yeah,
believing if you can have it, which happens when you're doing it for yourself. So
that's true.
using thought projection for others is such a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. And, I've had
Yeah,
3 people in particular that I can think of that wanted to have children. And 2 of them have had kids now. One of them is pregnant, and one had the baby on the 26th of December, like literally not even a month ago. And then a 4th one is about to have, just found out that she's pregnant. I thought, oh my goodness, this is just this whole collection of people that really wanted to have children, and putting in a little bit of effort to, you know, I mean, it's not hard to imagine that for somebody because you know they want it, you know.
Yeah.
And
And I think,
so few minutes of thought projection in someone's direction is such a beautiful way to be of service and to give.
absolutely. And I think back to what you were saying about imagining for others and projecting for others. I
Yeah.
think that is a lot easier sometimes, isn't it? Because you haven't got that personal attachment, like you say.
Mm.
I think it is in the Bible where they talk about getting people to pray for you is almost, it's easier because you haven't got that attachment to it and you haven't got that
Yeah.
distraction. And that's what
Yeah.
sort of popped into my mind when you said about, you know, praying for other people or
Yeah.
imagining for other people.
Yeah.
It is almost easier to do that because you're not attached to the outcome like they are. I think
Mm.
Neville talks a little bit about it as well in his work.
Yeah.
And it does make you think sometimes. You will just be going about your day and you will just suddenly get a very nice thought, you know, and you don't
Yeah.
know where it's come from.
Yes.
So I'm just thinking, you know, I just think, well, does that come from, you know, from somebody thinking nicely of you, or
Yeah, it could be. It'd be a lovely thing to be able to know if you could follow the origin. So you have the thought and you go, where did that come from? Zzz, go back to where the
yeah,
piece of thread and follow it all the way. I mean,
yes,
it's a
yeah,
fascinating, I mean, sometimes someone will say, yeah, I was thinking about you, and you know, they might tell you a bit of information that then links it together and you go, oh, it was them, you know. So
yeah,
it's wonderful. It's such a fun thing to practice. It really, it gets, and it also gets you off your own self a bit because we get so self-absorbed
yes,
with all this law of attraction. Me. It's like it's not all about you all the time. Let's get off it and see if we can be of service to someone by imagining something for them. Purely, there's
yeah,
nothing in it for you. It's about you being selfless and learning to give and learning to give without being noticed. You're not going to get any accolades for it. You know, you don't go and say, oh, yeah, I imagine that for you. You don't go and wave your little flag so you get some appreciation. You
yeah.
do it quietly,
And
silently.
what a nice way to be, in order that you don't need that notice. You don't need to
Yeah,
be noticed for doing it because
I know.
you're in that kind of situation in your own mind where you don't feel the need to
Yeah,
get that notice and that
yeah.
attention. You're just doing it quietly because you know
Mhm.
you can, and yeah, it's just
Mm.
it's a nice place to come from, isn't it? And to be,
Yeah,
and I think what you were saying before about the two types of people that you used to encounter when you were doing, you know, the work, the
yeah,
self-help kind of work. You'll get the ones that want to just do it in order to get a means to an end.
yes.
And you'll get the ones that really want to, you know, to change themselves. And I think
Mm.
that's the long-term aim, really. I think is to get to that point
Yeah.
where you are. It's a long-term thing. It's not just a short-term. I'm going
Mm.
to get this person or this job, and then I'm going to. Then what? You know, are
Mm.
you going to go back to the way you were, or are you going to carry this?
Exactly.
Are you going to carry this work on?
Yeah.
You know, hopefully, I'd like to think I was the latter. I think I'd like to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like to be that way, to be able to be that,
Mm.
to come from that kind of place, really.
And being happy today, here and now, not always chasing the next desire, chasing the next desire. Having desires is fine. But when you're constantly in that up, I've got my desire, wow, I'm exhilarated. I haven't got my desire, crash, bang, I'm suffering.
Yeah,
That gets extremely tiring over the years and over the decades, and it will wear you out. And you will either pick up an addiction to deal with it, or you will finally deal with your own self, which is process and let go of all the stuff that's kept you chasing the drug, because it is
yeah,
chasing a drug a lot of the time, and the drug is never, you get it and then you need more, you get it, you need more, you need, and that could be relationships, it could be food, it could be alcohol, cigarettes, pornography. There's
yeah,
such a long list of stuff that people chase and they need more and more of, and it's a
yeah,
dissatisfaction in the spirit, a dis-ease in the self. And once you
yeah,
really wake up to that and you go, holy heck, it was never enough, and it was never about them, it was never
yeah,
about my money, it was never about my job, it was about me. And this causing myself suffering through always wanting what's on the horizon so I can
yeah,
feel happy. once you get that it was never over there on the horizon, it was always here, like with the Wizard of Oz story.
Yeah.
They developed all those skills, you know, the Tin Man and the lion got the courage, and like they all had something they wanted, but they didn't realize when they got to the wizard with he was just some guy behind a curtain screwing around, really.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They actually developed the skills along the way that they always had it within them. And this is the same. Our journey is the same. We have had it inside of us all along, but we got distracted with the next relationship, the next job, more money, social media, and we've avoided that.
I think that's part of, again, about modern life as well, in the sense that we're always told to look to the future, to look to the next day, to look to the next hour. And Prentice talked a little bit in one of his chapters about sort of be as the lilies, he calls it, and it's a bit about sort of looking. He says, look at the animals. You know, they got them dinner first thing in the morning. They're not thinking about tomorrow's dinner. They're only thinking about today's dinner and today's breakfast, and what they're going to be. You know, they're not thinking ahead. It's about being in the present, isn't it? And thinking, you know, not wanting, not feeding the ego as well. I think they talk a lot about a lot of spiritual teachers, don't they? Talk about the ego always wanting the next thing to keep it satisfied. So it's about learning how to control the ego and learning how to live from the spirit rather than the ego. I think that's probably in a nutshell kind of what you were saying before. Like not looking for those things to satisfy us, but learning to that deeper kind of long-term satisfaction and what's the word I'm looking for? Contentment.
Yes. Inner contentment. Yeah.
Definitely.
Wonderful.
So, thank you.
Yeah, lovely. I love that. Yeah. And finding ways to do it, whether it's meditation, whether it's, you know, just being in the silence and having some time alone, or going to an organic market, or we're looking at a fire pit, or whatever it is, you find stuff that brings you back to yourself. And there's so many different things you can do. I'm always interested in how other people do it. Like, how do you come back to yourself? What do you actually do? You know, I find too, going for a swim in the ocean, it just clears you.
Yes.
I mean, there's so many different things you can do. And I'd be interested to see if people have made it to the end of this discussion, that they write down below what they do to come back to themselves. Because I love hearing other people's ideas about that.
They're often very simple things as well, aren't they?
Free and simple.
Yeah, a lot of the best things in life are free, as they say.
They said that,
isn't there, actually?
Yeah.
It's like going for a walk in the park, looking at the trees, you know, looking up at the stars is another one I really enjoy. Really puts things in perspective. Listen to the waves. There's loads, isn't there? There's so many. Loads. And they are simple and they're free. Because I think at the core of it all, we are sort of connected to everything, and it connects us again back to the source, doesn't it, through those things, I think.
It does. Yeah. Lovely.
Wow.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
That was lovely.
Really, thank you.
Thank you, Prentice. Really, I will put
Prentice.
So he's got a series. I'll find the series and I'll put the links down below for people that want to, you know, if they're in quarantine or if they're in lockdown, or even if they're not, it's nice to just keep reading and enjoying different authors and different people and different perspectives and different wordings of how they explain things. Sometimes you learn something.
And he was a Victorian writer. So some of the language is quite old fashioned.
Like Neville.
But compared to some of the sort of Victorian literature I've read, it's quite easy to follow as well, which is good. Some of the earlier ones can be a little bit hard to. It can be quite archaic and very long sentences and stuff, but this isn't too bad. And this was back in I think it was about 1885, 1895 when he wrote this.
Wow. So he's well before Neville.
Yeah, it's like the Victorian self-help book.
Yeah, wow. Who would have thought they'd had to self-help them? But yeah, little pockets of people. Who would have known that he'd have his book on some device on an iPad?
In
in 2021. Isn't that mind-blowing? If they could see that, it would blow their socks off.
And I think when you get into all this stuff, you start to find all these really old authors that you just didn't know existed.
That's so true. That's so true. You go down a rabbit hole of endless authors.
Yeah, and it's a cheap book as well. I think it's not too expensive. So that's really good for the viewers as well. It's not an expensive book, but there's just so much wisdom in there.
So much stuff. Yeah, especially if you buy ebooks or audio books, you don't buy the physical books like you have. Yeah. Oh, okay. I've got a frozen leg.
Oh dear.
Being cross-legged on my office chair. Oh, well, we will say goodbye. Do you want to say goodbye to the people?
Yeah, goodbye, everybody. I hope you enjoyed a slightly alternative author today, something a little bit different, but hopefully as relevant as well. There's lots of relevant, similar stuff in there, I think, that you can apply to, to Neville as well.
Beautiful. Thank you for joining me, Dan, and in England on this January 2021 morning. And I will see you, everybody, as we always do, you know where. And lots of love to you today.